Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us, those people who are here. We'll give it just a little bit longer because it's only just turned 8 o'clock. A couple more people join us. I can see the numbers coming up, so that's good. It's nice and early. Thank you for those of us joining us nice and early this morning. Okay, we'll get started then, and we might have a few more people joining us as it's only turned 8 o'clock, but I know we've got lots that we want to talk about. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for our first panel session happening with Governors for Schools and iGovS. Delighted to be joined by the lovely panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. Just to let everybody know that this session is being recorded and it will be available to watch again on our website on Monday. As I say, very excited to have everybody here. My name is Emma Hawker. I am the Impact and Training Manager at Governors for Schools. My colleague is off camera and behind the scenes, Will Durham, and he will be helping us to deal with any technical issues, although hopefully we won't have any, and deal with some of the questions that you might have. If anybody does have a question that they would like to put to the panel, please use the Q&A function that you should see at the bottom of your screen. So the Q&A function for questions for the panel. Okay, now speaking of the panel, I'm delighted to have everyone here joining us. So I'm going to pass over to the team and let them introduce themselves. Could we start with Pam, please?
Okay, I'm Pam Garrington. I'm currently Chair of Trustees for a very small trust up in Stoke-on-Trent. Only came on board in September, and actually my remit is the trust have decided that as a two-school trust they're not really sustainable, so I've been brought on to actually transfer the schools to a larger, more well-established trust. And in past lives I have done a few transfers of trusts, and I'm also chair of a primary school in Birmingham, a local authority primary school that actually is a foundation school because it is part of a cooperative trust.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Pam. Harry, could we hear from you?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Harry James. I'm currently chair of a multi-academy trust of special needs schools in Richmond and Kingston in southwest London. I'm also chair of a pupil referral unit in Bracknell Forest, and in past lives I've been chair of primary schools, secondary schools and a sixth form college.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to Pat, and who's also going to give us some information about iGovS as well. Thanks, Pat.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Governors for Schools for inviting us to join this first session. So my name is Pat Barber. I'm chair in 4 schools currently, secondary schools and primary schools. I'm also a governor in a school where I'm actually there to give support in moving them from a poor situation, let's say, to a better place where they have been in previous years. So I'm there as a support for moving the school forward, actually. I am also a governor trainer, and I am one of the ex-NLGs that have stepped aside from when the government decided to move NLGs into the National Governors Association, where it was only going to be doing one part of the work, in our view, which was just external reviews of governance, whereas we felt that there was a need for more one-to-one support for governors and more specific support. And a group started up immediately, and I think we've now got up to about 32 members, and that's across England, and I think we've got one in Wales now. So but because of being able to work remotely, we can all help wherever we're needed, which is great, although we do go out into schools as well. We don't charge for our services. It is free, except if it goes into wanting an external review of governance, and then it would be for the individual person consult with the school. So we are voluntary, which is what we wanted to be. We are offering the service for free, and we are here to support, because we know how difficult it is, especially if you're a chair of governors. It's a lonely place to be, and we want to be your champion to sit and walk alongside you if that's what you need. So I've got some other information which I am going to pass on to Emma, and she will circulate it to you all after this session. So without further ado, I think we should move towards some of the questions you've already submitted, which we thank you for. But we are happy to take other questions. We're also happy if you want to talk to us individually afterwards. We will talk about that at the end, how you may do that. So I'm going to pass over to Pam, who's going to answer one of the it's several of the questions been put together around meetings. So Pam.
Okay, yeah. So I'm the questions that are here that I'm sort of going to fit together. It says sometimes it feels like we talk and nod a lot in meetings, but I'm not really sure if our time has been worthwhile or if we've made a difference. Linked to, what's the best way to contribute to a high-performing school with an established governing body? And also the question, can I remain strategic? But how can I remain strategic but be familiar enough with operational matters to be effective in the governance role? So trying to answer all of those three things together. And I suppose the first thing that I would want to say about meetings is that the meeting isn't the whole thing, is it? That governors need to know the schools, need to make visits in the schools, and this is absolutely essential. So in terms of, yes, remaining strategic, in a meeting, you are in a, when you make a visit into a school, you should remain strategic, so that it's important how the meeting is set up in the first place. What are you going to ask questions about? It's not just a general meeting to find out, isn't the school a nice place to be, but strategically link it with the school development priorities, for example, or in your named role as if you, for example, you're a safeguarding governor, to make that visit. So agree the focus in the first place, and then you will be strategic, so that when you come to your meeting, you can actually report back on that, because in the meeting, a lot of the meeting will be about a report, I guess, on what's actually happened. So there might not be lots of strategic decisions to be making actually in that meeting, but you'll have done a lot of the work behind the scenes. And I suppose this is coming back to performing and contributing in a high-performing school. It's about you working as a team. So hopefully, even though you've got ex-heads and teachers, everybody will have something to contribute to that team. Make sure that you fill in a skills audit so that you understand what are the strengths of each individual members of the team. But for example, if you're a parents' governor, or if you're a co-opted governor, you will probably know an awful lot about the local community that ex-head teachers and teachers won't know. So please make sure that that is a focus, because although engaging with the local community isn't one of the core, necessarily the statutory core functions of governance, it is really important and recognised that taking the views of the local community really is important. If at the beginning, I'm sensing here that you want to contribute but not sure how, maybe you're new to the governing body. So hopefully there'll be an induction programme for you. Hopefully there will be a training sessions for you. If you're feeling anxious about making the first visit, try and make a visit with somebody else who is much more experienced. make that visit with them so that they can sort of coach you a little bit. You can work together, you can find out the sorts of questions that that they ask, but always agree the focus before you start. In meetings, when you say it feels like we talk a lot, make sure that in the meeting it isn't just a report on what's happened, but that you're also looking forward. I think it was once said to me that in an effective meeting, spend 30% of the time looking forward to the next stages. So make sure there somewhere in the meeting there is time for you to think. And that's often very difficult in governing body meetings, because when you look at the agenda and there are 18 or 19 items on the agenda, it's difficult to create that thinking time. But if you have more than 3 meetings a term, and many governing bodies do, you then have a much better ability to sometimes break away from those 18 items. And what's wrong with just taking 1 or 2 very strategic items, like spending almost a whole meeting looking at the school development plan, breaking it down, thinking about it. The NGA always say that governance is a thinking role, and I do really believe that, and believe that you should enable some time for thinking, for looking forwards in meetings. So what now? What do we do next? What are the implications on what you've just told me in this meeting? What can we do to help you? What do we need to think about now? What do we need to have as the focus of our next school visit? What kinds of strategic questions should we be asking? And those are the kinds of things that you could be working together as a team to come up with some of the answers, and support one of the 2 of the governors that perhaps don't feel as confident as the rest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pam. While we're on the topic of talking about strategic, we have had a question come in, someone saying, is making decisions on staffing structure strategic?
I can answer that straight away. You should look at the staffing structure. That is, in my view, a strategic thing to be doing, reviewing the staffing structure, because that will have financial implications as well. So I feel, yes, that it is good practice that you look at the staffing structure, particularly in the present climate that we're in, the financial climate. I think it's almost essential to review that on an annual basis. So yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pam. That's brilliant. Lots of lovely answers there, and lots of interesting things for us to think about in terms of meetings and how we can make sure that we're really kind of fulfilling that role in the best way. Thank you very much. Right, Harry, we're going to go over to you for talking a little bit about a question that came in around staff morale. So a vice chair who feels that perhaps their school staff's got poor culture and morale, and that they've tried to address that with the chair, and they found that a little bit difficult, and what governors can do maybe if they're in a school where kind of they suspect that there's a little bit of challenge around morale. Okay,
thank you. The first thing that I'd like to do is reiterate what Pam said about thinking, and it's really, really important that you don't just sort of get off the shelf things and try and apply them. It's about thinking, how does this apply to my school, in my situation? What do I do? What do we do? The other thing that I'm going to talk about really very briefly is you know, almost sometimes like a terrible word, but it's processes. And one of the things that I think, I'm a great believer in processes and planning. Processes are there for a reason, and they're a reason to help us if they're applied correctly. And I'm a great believer in planning as well, is thinking ahead of what it is we need to do over time, over the year, what plans do we need to have in place, what sort of systems do we need to have in place, and then checking whether they're working properly. So to come back to this question, there were a few things in the question. One was around some concerns about safeguarding, and one of the things that all schools should have is a safeguarding governor. All schools should have that, and a safeguarding governor. That safeguarding governor should be in regular contact with a designated safeguarding leads in their school, and they should provide the board of governors with regular reports and regular updates and regular data, so that the board can be aware of what's happening with safeguarding. In terms of morale, lots of people, and it might be fairly controversial, lots of people are talking about the pandemic and the effect of the pandemic. And I don't think there is any doubt that the pandemic has had an effect on staff morale. It's also had an effect on behaviour in schools, which has a sort of a knock-on effect. But I think, you know, from our point of view, it's happened. We can't change that it's happened. And what we have to do is deal with it. And we have to have systems in place and processes in place to be able to deal with it. In terms of staff morale, one of the things, what we're talking about from iGovS here is our experience of what's happened and what's worked. And I have been involved in a number of schools where staff surveys are carried out on a regular basis, at least annually, and that those staff surveys are often sponsored by the local governing board or the governing board. And the results go to the governing board. The governing board analyses them, and then you come up with a sort of an action plan. And it's very important to communicate this action plan. So, you know, one of the worst things that you can do in any survey, but in a staff survey about how they feel, is ask them how they feel, understand how they feel, and then do nothing about it. So it's really, really important that you come up with "you said, we do" type of thing, is to communicate, is say, yes, we're listening. And sometimes there are things that might be beyond your control, is you can't do anything about. But what you need to do is explain that, is to say, actually, there are some things we cannot change, are outside of our control. This is why we can't do it, but we will do something else. We will try and address the situation. Some governing boards appoint a staff wellbeing governor, and that's becoming increasingly popular. And quite a few schools now will have some sort of staff wellbeing plan. And again, that's really useful, and that would sort of feed in to this cycle of planning and review. So if you have a staff wellbeing plan, if you have a staff survey, then what happens comes out of the staff survey, what comes out of the staff wellbeing plan goes back into the questions for the staff survey for the following year. So you get this sort of cycle of, are we improving? And you're getting information all the time. The staff survey is a sort of an annual thing, but I also know of some schools that will do, rather than one great big staff survey at the end of the year, will do sort of sample surveys throughout the year to get, you know, to gauge well-being and staff feeling throughout the year. And that includes just some staff on a sample basis, but you build up the information as you go throughout the year. There was also some talk in this question about the chair not engaging and having real problems with that. Again, going back to what I was talking about, processes and systems, all governing boards should have some sort of evaluation system, self-evaluation, to evaluate their own effectiveness at the end of the year. And I would suggest that should include an anonymous 360-degree review of the chair. And then that's fed back to the board, and then the board should come up with a governance development plan from the self-evaluation. And again, they're on that cycle of continuous improvement. Is that, you know, we've assessed how effective we are. There are some areas where we could improve. Okay, what are we going to do about it? Let's have an action plan. Let's do something about it. Let's improve. Yeah, and so I think that's it in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. I think lots of really relevant points there, especially as we're talking a lot at the moment around retention of staff as well. And that's a common topic. And kind of nice as we kind of come to the close of Volunteers Week as well, thinking about how we as volunteers, as the board, can make sure that we're providing effective practice. Thank you very much, Harry. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Pat to talk about a question we had coming in about Ofsted. And the question was, what advice do you have for governors about how to respond to and reflect on an Ofsted inspection? Once Ofsted have been in, what should we do next? Oh, you're muted, Pat.
I was the first one, sorry about that. It's a very good question, actually, because the report that you will eventually get won't give you any advice whatsoever in the new framework that's set up. So I do urge you, if possible, that as many of your governors attend the feedback session and the interview session with one of the inspectors. There you will glean some ideas of what they're thinking about your school. The sessions with the governors tend to last about half an hour. There's various questions they may ask you. There's no set pattern to it, depends on what they've seen in the school, but you can glean from them how they're feeling about your school. And then at least, you know, the chair and as many other governors as possible attend the feedback session at the end of the inspection, where they will talk to you. And that's it. They don't take questions. You have to just listen. But that will be where you will hear everything that they are going to put into their report, and that what they consider needs to be improved, even better if, as they put it. As for your actual own entry in the report, please don't look for anything more than about 5 words, which tends to be the governors know the school well. The governors know the school well, 6 words, sorry. So that's about it. Unless there's a problem, and then they may say a few more words, but that tends to be their response to governors. What I would suggest when you go into your meeting, have your own check card with you, your grab card as I call it, so it's all ready with all the important information you need to know to impart. Don't forget to make sure you say all the things about what's really good about your school. Don't let them always lead the conversation. But what you need to listen for carefully is what they're actually saying to you, because there will be messages in there that are suggesting things could be better in a certain area. When you get the report, your head teacher and obviously senior leaders will chew over it. They will get a first view of it to correct it for errors, and errors can only be factual errors and not any of the comment errors. So if they've said the wrong teacher was interviewed, etc., and then they will look to see what through their comments as to what they're actually saying, because under the new framework that's in place now, the head teacher has very little after that 2 or 3 hour conversation day before the meeting with the inspector, because they talk to the middle leaders. That's where they now talk to the children and the middle leaders. So there's very little feedback or flow of information midway through. They have at the end of day 1, they will speak quickly to the head teacher and may give them a heads up of something they would like to see a little bit more of the next day, which is a bit of a hint that if we've not seen what we need to see in science, for instance, so we want to go back. So is there a slight issue there in science that they could be raising? Just listen for those sort of clues that come through the conversations that they do have with you. What do you do next? You make a plan. It's all part of your development plan. What they raise probably will already be on your development plan. They've just come in before you've managed to complete it. You could have your 1 or 3 year plan, and it is part of that plan. So are you doing it, or does it need to be tweaked to address something that they have found that you were unaware of, and the school were unaware of. Unlikely. It's, people are, but they do find some things. But of course, the most important thing you as governors need to make sure of is that your safeguarding is where it needs to be. Because if it's not, because that's the first thing they will look at is your single central record. And if there's anything wrong with it, depending on your inspectors, they could say, we're ending the inspection now. You have failed on safeguarding. Or they may say, there's a few tweaks that need to be made. I'll come back and look at this afternoon to give the school time. That often happens when they have forgotten to remove somebody who has left and it's still sitting on the single central record, or there's a date that's missing for a qualification. They're the type of things they will say, you just need to put a few tweaks in. So it's nothing major, but it just needs to be addressed. And they will give you an opportunity to do it if it's that level. Anything further than that, they can say that they are going to end the inspection under safeguarding, which is a biggie, because if you're an outstanding school, you're now an RI school immediately. No matter how good everything and the teaching is in the school, you're out. So just be mindful of those tiny little things that can make it even smoother. It is a worrying time, and it goes back to this well-being of the staff, etc. Make sure all your staff are okay and everyone's keeping very level-headed about it. It is just 2 days in your life, and then they will be gone, and then you will be left. So yes, look at your school development plan, make sure whatever they've said is included, and if there's anything new, then add it in and keep reviewing and reviewing, because at the next inspection, that will be their starting point of what they thought was needed improvement in the last plan. And I think that's probably all I can say on Ofsted. Probably all you want to hear on Ofsted, actually.
Thank you very much, Pat. That's great. Just to expand on a couple of those points, a question that's come in, someone said, a recent Ofsted inspection, as governors, we were asked what impact do we have as governors and how do we know?
Yes.
After being a governor for a year, I found this hard to answer. Are there any tips? And does this link with Harry's self-evaluation point?
Yes, I think it does link very, very well with the self-evaluation point. One of the other points I would have added on to what was said in that feedback on that question was that at the end of your meeting, just spend 5 minutes saying, what difference have we made? I've sat here for 2 hours. What difference have we made as a governing board? What do we need to make sure we're doing for the next meeting? Just recap what you've done. Agree on who's doing what. Just take 5 minutes. And I found that very impactful, actually. And that is where the impact is. And it's just about it. You may not see all of the impact over a year, because the first meeting you'll just be trying to learn everybody's names. So it's a difficulty as a new governor to be able to answer it. But if you do it as a collective at the end of each meeting, you'll soon pick up on, you can see where the improvements are coming through.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pat. I have to say, we do that now in the trust where I've become a governor, and I've never had that before in meetings, but I really love that. I think that's great. And now in every meeting I go to, whether it's, school governance related or something else, always like, right at the end, what difference have we made? And I think you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to kind of deviate too much, but sorry, Harry.
Yeah, can I just add one thing, very, very quickly add one thing to that, which is I think is fairly relevant. I've seen, I think what Pat says there is absolutely right about the end of the meetings. What I've also seen produce an annual governance statement. And in that governance statement, they produce it for all the parents and staff and everyone. In that annual governance statement, they do two things. They outline what they've done over the year. And the second thing is they say what difference they've made. And actually, the discipline of having to write that forces the governing body to think, OK, what difference have we made during the year?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. That's great. And actually, we've got a couple of points I want to talk to you about. One is a new question, but one is a question that's just come in that picked up on what you were saying about the 360 review. Someone said, great point to restaff morale. However, the role of chair is incredibly difficult and hard to succession plan. Could a 360 put people off stepping up or demoralise a chair who is doing their best? So I wondered if you kind of had any any points that you wanted to put on there? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? It depends on the attitude in which you go into these things with. If you go in with a reasonably defensive attitude, then you'll see everything as a threat. If you go in with a positive attitude of saying the whole point in doing this exercise is to see how we can learn, how we can improve. You know, this is not a blame culture. It's looking about how we can get better as a board, as individuals. And one of the things I would say in that 360-degree review, and I've had lots myself, and sometimes, you know, they can be a little bit painful. And what I would say is that as a chair, you put it aside for a few days, then you go back to it and you look at it and you think, okay, fair enough, that's true, and I need to address that. The other thing I would say is that in the reviews that I carry out, the chair also has individual conversations with each governor. They are totally confidential, but they are two things. They are, one is, what's your view of how the board is progressing, developing, what does it need to do? And you as an individual governor and your contribution, do you think you're making a contribution? Is there any support, training like that you need in order to be an effective governor? You know, and sometimes there are difficult conversations to be had around there, especially around attendance. You know, if a governor only attends one meeting in 6, then that conversation needs to be had. But I think it is around creating, and we'll talk about this quite a lot, I think, is culture, creating a culture of self-support and continuous improvement rather than blame.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. But you're right, we can sometimes be a bit of a self-critical bunch as governors.
Yes.
I think, remember, we're all there. We're all trying to do our best for the board, for the school, and for all the pupils. You're absolutely right. Thank you. So that leads us quite nicely back to Harry again to talk a little bit about induction and how we can make sure that new governors have an effective induction plan. And I imagine that might expand on some of those points a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question was around induction process, and specifically around people who are completely new to the education sector. And I think sometimes that can be an advantage if you are completely new to the education sector. One of the other questions we had was around, I think it was a high-performing governing board, but it was mainly made up of ex-head teachers and education staff, which is great. But the fact is, you need a diverse board in order to be able to reflect the school and the community in which you're serving, and to be able to ask those different questions. You need a diverse board, and that means people who are outside of the education sector. Because quite often, when you know, and I include myself in this, when we are intimately involved in education, we start to make certain assumptions. And when we're making those assumptions, somebody will come along and shake us up a bit and say, actually, why are you doing that? What does that mean? I don't understand that. And that, you know, that sort of goes again in the cycle. You start questioning yourself. So in terms of the induction, I think, you know, there are a number of things. What I would say is there needs to be a comprehensive induction pack. So that just gives you all the facts and information about the school, how it operates, what the structures are, how the curriculum is developed. Talks, you know, people who are coming in are new to governance. They will get acronyms like SDPs, SIPs, things like that, things that they haven't a clue what they mean and how they work. So I would say you have an induction plaque that tells you all about the school, explains everything about the school, and that's just the first. There is absolutely no the best thing you can possibly do is to get into the school, see how it works, talk to the senior leadership team, talk to the head teacher, talk to the staff, talk to the pupils, see what happens in the school, because it is this difference between the theory and the practice. And it's looking at what does that actually look like in practice in the school. So get into the school. One of the things about going into the school is it's actually really enjoyable. It's actually really, really enjoyable going into the school. And I would advise any governor, not just a new governor, but any governor, to spend some time with the children, and quite often at lunchtime. Just go in and have lunch with the children. You will be absolutely amazed if you sit at a table of children, what they will tell you about the school and how much you will learn about the school. The other thing as well, there are a number of training courses available by different organisations. I think nearly all local authorities either run it themselves or will outsource a sort of new governors training course. So in all the schools that I'm associated with, that is compulsory. I know some it's not compulsory, but I would say it's absolutely compulsory, because you just learn so much, and there is a lot to learn. I mean, not just the acronyms, but the vagaries of school finance, for example. Is you will get accountants coming in, and the first thing they will say is, I haven't a clue how this works. I'm an experienced accountant. So the training courses are excellent in that. I think it really helps to have an experienced mentor, because again, what will happen is you will get bombarded with lots and lots of information up front. That can seem overwhelming. And what you will have is you will have lots and lots of questions. If you have an experienced governor on the board as your mentor that you can relate to, that you can talk to, that you can ask questions of, that's really, really helpful. And quite often it would help if you did some visits to the school with that mentor, so you can ask questions as you go along. You know, how does this work? What does that mean? How do we do things? Yeah, and I think mostly it is about getting to know the school and getting involved. It's about the culture, as I mentioned before, of the governing board, is that culture is there are no such things as stupid questions. You know, ask the questions. You might think it's stupid, it's obvious, but you can bet your life that there are probably 2 or 3 other people who've got the same question but don't want to ask it. So just ask questions. That's the way you find out. And the other thing as well is that I would say review after a certain amount of time, 6 months or 9 months or something, have a formal review. Okay, how did the induction process go? What point are you at now? Is there any more that you need? So although it will start off as initial induction, it's an ongoing process to get to that point of being an experienced governor.
If I could just add one thing to that, Harry, what's in my schools we've introduced is a governor's day. So we all come into school, we agree the date at the beginning of the academic year, and we all come in together, and it's a planned visit, and we have our last meeting follows on after the school visit, and everybody does it together. And it's very it's also a very nice way of getting to know your fellow governors, because you don't always get a chance to get to know them either. But it certainly is an opportunity to see the school in action and eat with the children, where you'll find out everything you need to know, as Harry says.
We have that too, and in fact it was just earlier on this week for me, and it was a very joyous occasion. That's all I can say.
Yes.
That sounds lovely. I think after this I'm going to be contacting the heads and say, well, can I come in and join the kids for lunch? That sounds brilliant. Thank you very much. Lots of really useful bits there. I can see Will has just popped something in the chat as well, just to make everybody aware. Very recently, Governors for Schools have put out a little report. It's free to read. And it's where we've spoken to different governors about their induction experiences and put together some recommendations that kind of nicely match Harry's advice, which is fantastic, about some of the things that we felt made an effective induction. So you can find that on our website, but we'll put a link for that as well with all the bits and pieces that we're going to send out to everybody later. I would say as well, if you're not too familiar with Governors for Schools materials, we do have some induction support materials as well that are available on our website. And again, we'll include the link for that as well. But like Harry says, there are lots and lots of bits and pieces out there, and it could be that your board has something in particular they want you to do. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Right. I'm going to go over to Pam for a legal question now. And the question was, the term legal often accompanies information about the responsibilities of governors. How can we work within this framework without feeling alarm?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that yes, as governors, we do have 3 statutory core functions: to set the strategic direction of the school, to review the performance of staff and pupils, and to ensure financial probity. And those are statutory duties. But in actual fact, that sort of keeps us on track. I've been in governance for a long time, and I think when I first started in governance, governance seemed nothing more than having a cup of tea and a biscuit and a bit of a chat and then going away. Whereas at least that does keep the focus. And I would actually say that really that should be the focus of our work. Those three core functions. Particularly as well, you will have school policies. Please ensure that you that it won't cause alarm if you always follow the policies. Ensure that the key policies are always up to date. Your safeguarding policy, your complaints policy, your whistleblowing policy, all the HR policies. If you're a local authority school, follow those policies and make sure that you adopt those policies, so that if there are any difficulties, particularly over HR matters, the local authority will support you if you've got those policies up to date. And so many times when I've been working with different governing bodies, where they have gone wrong is that they have not followed those policies, or made sure that those policies have been agreed, that you have an up-to-date policy. So really make sure that you follow that. If you are a trustee in a multi-academy trust or in a SAT, yes, you do have more responsibilities, because you are responsible really for running a business. So you do have that, but you will have public liability insurance, either RPA or the equivalent. So just follow that, but follow the policy every single time, and you can't go wrong really, as long as you do follow that policy. There is often a myth that trustees have limited liabilities. That in fact actually technically is not the case. Members have a limited liability of £10, but that does not apply to trustees. But you will have your public liability insurance in place. As long as you follow that policy, you follow all the financial things, you follow the ESFA financial handbook, follow those things, and then you can't go wrong. But I think the word legal shouldn't be frightening. It's really, it is about accountability. We are using public money or making decisions about public money, but just make sure that you stick to those core statutory responsibilities of governance.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pam. No, something very important for us to all remember there. We shouldn't kind of let that put us off wanting to get in there and do our best. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Pat now for a question that came in around foundation governors. And the question was, we are struggling to recruit foundation governors. This isn't because of a lack of people, but an insistence by the church bodies to recruit only committed Christians. thereby rejecting some excellent candidates. I've tried everything I can think of, including my executive principal raising the issue directly with the Diocese Director of Education. Are there any unusual strategies or anything I might not have thought of that the panel can recommend to help persuade church bodies to appoint foundation governors?
I'm afraid I don't have any miracle answers for this, and my heart goes out to you, because as being a chair in 4 Catholic schools and a clerk in 3 Church of England schools, I know your pain and I feel your pain. However, one suggestion I do have for you is that Harry, I think it was mentioned earlier about a skills audit. So if you're working to appoint people to your skills audit, then there's a very good case that you can make to the diocese why you are wanting this particular person to be recruited. But that particular person has got to fulfill the requirement of the Articles of Association. And that is your Bible, really, and you have to go by it. And foundation governors have to outnumber all other governors by 2. So do you need to look at the number of governors you have on your board and perhaps reconstitute to reduce your number so that you can get a fairer number, so you don't have 18 members? I don't know how many you have on your board, but that's one way you could reduce your number, but you'd have to reconstitute, and it's a little bit of a process, but it's not, it's not tiresome. It's more a time consuming than a time length of getting it through. That's one way you could reduce numbers, or you could make a full strong case why this particular person meets the needs, fulfilling the Christian requirement of, and also fills your need on the board. They're not to a penny now, they're far from it. I have actually been into churches myself and spoken to congregations and tried to get recruits that way. It does work. You might get 1 or 2 if your priest is open to that idea. But other than that, I would look beyond your own parish sometimes, because not all parishes have schools connected to them. So there may be another church further along nearby, but within your community, but not actually connected to your school. Try that congregation as well to see if you can find some people there that would be able to support you. It's not a quick fix. It's the requirements. What we're asking of volunteers now is quite a lot. And people's lives have changed, even before COVID, like people's lives have changed. Parents have to work now, and they don't have, when my children were young, I did actually, I've always worked, but some parents didn't have to work. Some mums were at home, some dads were at home. And therefore they had that bit of extra time that they could give. It's not like that now. Life has totally changed. So I do feel your pain. It's not really a full answer for you. I don't have this magic wand. I wish I did, but there's 2 things you could try. So that's reducing your governing board number, or trying to convince the diocese by way of a skills audit that this is the person that you really need for your school.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pat. Yes, can be quite challenging for some of those boards, absolutely. So we're going to go over to Harry now for a question all around SEND. We've got the question: how has support for SEND children changed in the last few years? How can governors provide effective support for SEND officer and other staff with regard to pupils with SEND?
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. The first thing I'd say is that SEND is an area where there's lots of information. There's lots of initiatives, there's lots of changing, and it can be quite difficult to keep up at times. Excuse me. There are lots of websites that are the ones that provide you with updates and changes, so that you don't need to go through the whole thing again. They will tell you what has changed. What I'd like to talk about is the change that I have seen happening. It isn't totally happened yet, but it is happening, and that's what I describe as SEND becoming mainstream and not just an add-on. So in the past, what would happen is that we would look at the school and the way in which the school works, and then we'd think about special educational needs, and we'd get systems for introducing special educational needs and how to deal with it. and so on. That's changing now, and that we think of special educational needs and disabilities as part of what we do in everyday school life. And let me give you an example of that, is that if you are a link governor and you are linked to maths or English or science, and you go in during your link visit and you're talking to the subject's leader about their particular subject, about their planning, how they're going to implement it, so on and so forth, what should be included now is how does that affect people with special educational needs? How does the curriculum cater for those people with special educational needs as part of the mainstream curriculum, not as an add-on? When they're thinking about the budget in terms of resources, what do we think about special educational needs? What resources do we need? That should be part of the mainstream planning in the budget, not an afterthought, something that comes on afterwards. In my opinion, all staff and all governors should receive special educational needs and disability training. In order to be able to be an effective governing board, you need to be able to ask searching questions. In order to be able to ask searching questions, you need to be informed and you need to understand things. So in my opinion, it's not just the responsibility of the SENCO and the SEND governor. They might be specialists in their particular area and have more detailed and in-depth information, but it is a bit in a way like safeguarding. It is the responsibility of us all now, special educational needs. So in my opinion, that is the main change that has happened and continues to happen. It hasn't happened everywhere and it still needs to be embedded, but it's now a natural thought.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. And we've had a question coming that I think perhaps builds on that a little bit. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this. It says, I'm finding that complaints and requests for suspension review are getting more frequently complex, particularly around behaviour and SEND. Do you have any advice on how to better understand this area and how to prepare the board for it once it reaches the governor stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we were, we've talked a number of times about the pandemic, and I think, there is no doubt that that's having effect on behaviour, and I think lots of schools around the country are seeing increasing problems with behaviour and complaints about behaviour and complaints about special educational needs, and all I would say in terms of special educational needs, it's that where I do most of my work in sort of southwest London, and I think it's the same in quite a lot of places, the school role in mainstream schools is going down. There is a drop in the number of pupils. Special education needs is on a completely opposite trajectory. We have, I think it was about 5 years ago, and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. And therefore, I think, what needs to happen is, as I mentioned in my last answer, is that governors need much more training in special educational needs. And I would say in that includes that process for complaints and grievance. It's not enough. We can apply this to lots of things. And I'll go back to, we were talking about the thinking governor. It's not his work. We have to understand how they work in practice. So we will have a complaints policy and a grievance policy, but we have to understand how they work. Sometimes, governors will be asked to investigate a complaint without much experience of how they work, with only having read the policy. That's really not good enough. We need much more in-depth training on it. We need to understand it more. We need discussions at governing board level around that policy. This is how it works. What do we do? have some sort of scenarios planning. Say, okay, in this situation, what do we do? It's so basically it's more training, more talking, understanding the policies.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. Okay, so we've had some really excellent questions come in from our audience while we've been talking about those bits. And I think this might be one for Pam, but kind of do correct me if you think I'm wrong, Board. So it says, I am a trustee within a 3-school MAT, and we're looking at merging with a larger MAT. Our schools are keen to retain their own identity and autonomy. Do you have any advice about the best way to go about this? There are 3 main MATs that our regional commissioner has recommended.
Okay, yes, that's a really good question, I think. First of all, you need to decide, I think you probably have, but you need to decide as a board, what is it you want to retain? What is it that's important and unique about your particular trust at the moment that you want to retain? And make sure that you ask lots of questions about the new trusts, really, that you do a lot of your own due diligence before you decide which trust. The regional director will have directed you towards 3 trusts. That doesn't prevent you from going to have a look yourself and doing your own work. So what I would suggest is that a group of you, maybe a working party, puts together what are the criteria, what are the things that that you don't want to give up, really, by going into a new trust. What are the essential things that you want to keep hold of? But also make sure that you have it firmly in your mind for what reasons you want to transfer to a larger, more well-established trusts. What are the things that you want to get out of that trust? And make sure that you ask those questions. And you know, not only that they do their presentation, but that you really have your questions ready for them. Because once you take that big step, you can't go back on it. So yes, what I would say is, yes, the regional director might point you in the direction of 3 trusts. Make sure you do your homework on those 3 trusts. I'm sure you will, but also make sure that that they do have that they do align, particularly, I think, with your vision and values. I think that's really important, that you have a meeting yourself to make sure you know what your vision and values are and what you don't want to give up, what you really feel that you want to retain.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pam. That's great. Right, I think, let's see if we can kind of squeeze in one last one with maybe a bit of a concise answer if we can. If you're a link curriculum governor, when you plan a focus of the visit, how can you balance making your visit purposeful without evaluating the quality of teaching and assessment? I don't know who wants to jump in there.
I would say you look at your school development plan, see what's on your school development plan, and then that's your focus. Use that as your focus. So it's not about the teaching, it's what you're looking for development and how that is being seen across the school, not just in one class, across the school, primary, from reception upwards, see how it's working.
Yeah,
I think that's
sorry, if I can just jump in, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think often when I look at staff visits that governors have made, they haven't referred enough to the school development plan, and I think it's really essential and really helps you actually to have a really strict focus on what it is you want to see, what is the purpose of that visit.
And I think my last comment is feed it all back to all the governors so everybody is aware.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, can I just add to that as well? Is if you're a link governor for a particular subject, it really helps to have. I mean, I know a number of schools they followed sort of the Ofsted. You visit 3 times a year, the implementation, the intent, and the intent, the implementation, and the impact. So at that first visit, you're talking to the subject leader and saying, okay, you've got a plan for your subject. Explain it to me. Explain why you're doing this. Explain to me how it's going to work in action, and explain to me how it's going to improve your subject for pupils across the school. So, lots of things we do as governors is about asking questions, and it's about asking the right questions.
You're on mute, Emma.
Thank you. I knew it was going to happen at least once. There we go. Thank you very much, everybody. I think that is a fantastic way to end that, asking the right questions. I think that's a wonderful point about kind of the work that we do as governors. So as it has got to 9 o'clock, I think we're going to start to draw things to a close. I would like to say thank you very much, so much to our panel. Thank you very much for everybody who's joined us. Our apologies if we didn't get to every question. What I will say, we want to let everyone know we will be sending out some more information about iGovS and how you can get in touch with iGovS. If there's anything that you've seen, you heard from our panel, and you think I would like to speak to that particular person at iGovS in a bit more detail, you do need to go through that main iGovS contact. But if you put it kind of for the attention of Pat or Harry or Pam, then they'll be able to expand that and help you a little bit more. But we will have some more information coming out to everyone who's attended, just to give you a bit more detail about how you can get in touch with iGovS. But it's a fantastic resource. Thank you so much to our panel. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.